Hey you guys, good morning and happy Monday. I guess it's not morning anymore. I'm a little slow this morning. Um, so I hope y'all had a nice break. We are going to learn the law of cosines over the next couple of days. If you remember back to before spring break, which I hope y'all had a really nice one, by the way. Before spring break, we talked about the law of sines. So now we're going to talk about the law of cosines. So let me just write down really quickly. As a refresher, the law of sines, is what we used last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess technically. And we used the law of sines when we had angle, side, angle, 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 side, or the bad word backwards. Okay, so we used law of sine when we were given that information: two sides and an angle, or two sides and an angle. Wait, I said the same thing. Two angles and a side, or two sides and an angle. Okay. And remember, this one was like the ambiguous case that was a little bit complicated, where you kind of had to think through some things. Okay. All right. So honestly, this is a little easier. I would say. The law of cosines is used with side, side, side. So that one's pretty easy because it's just all the sides. And then SAS, or side angle side, the angle has to be between the two sides. Okay, so that location of that A is important because it is similar to SSA, but here the A is not between and here the A is between. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. Now, here are your formulas. Typically, I would say you need to have them memorized, but obviously in this scenario, you do not have to have them memorized. So I want you to have those written down. So you're going to do these three on the left side when you are looking for sides. Okay, and you are going to do the three on the right side when you're looking for angles. Now, it kind of looks daunting. It looks like you have 6 formulas to memorize, but I'll try to explain it today as I work through the first examples, how I remember it. And it's really not, I don't really remember like A's, B's, and C's and all that stuff. I mainly just remember like where the sides and the angles are located with respect to each other. Okay, so notice these are all lowercase letters and these are uppercase letters. So that'll help you also remember, sides are lowercase letters and angles are uppercase letters. You will need a calculator. So get out your own calculator if you don't have it available. And then if you don't have a calculator, remember how we went to Desmos? All right, I went ahead and, I need to turn off airplane mode, I guess, to access the internet. Let me do that really quickly. So if my sister or other people text, we'll just have to ignore it. Okay, so we're going to clear all. So remember that Desmos looks like this, and you just click on that scientific button. Okay. So I'll show you with that calculator how to do the problems. So just have that handy. Okay. All right. So it's going to be the same directions as before, where it's going to say solve the triangle. Remember, solve means you need to find all the missing sides and all the missing angles. And so just for my personal keeping, if you will, I'm going to write it down so I don't forget like what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for side A, I'm looking for angle B, and I'm looking for angle C. Okay, so I'm going to write those down so I don't forget. Okay, sorry, my sister and I are talking because of the storm last night. It was a little scary. Okay, so let's first identify what type of triangle we have here. So does everybody see this is a side, this is an angle, and this is a side? And is that angle between the two sides? And the answer is yes, it is. So this is a SAS problem, side, angle, side. Okay, so that tells us we're going to use the law of cosines. I don't think it'll be hard as we're learning these because I'm splitting up law of sines and law of cosines, but by the end of the week or next week, we're going to put them together. So you want to be able to know like when do I do which one. Okay. All right. So I hear a crying toddler in the background. So I apologize if you hear that. I think he does not want to go take a nap. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find this side A. All right, so we're going to go to this formula here because we're looking for a side and we're looking for A. All right, so notice the formula says A squared. That's a little funky, but we'll talk about what that means in a second. All right, so A squared equals B squared. All right, so B is this side right here. It's across from big B. And this is C. Okay, so we're going to do B squared, which is 15 squared, plus C squared, which is 10 squared, minus 2 times B, which is 15, times C, which is 10. And y'all, I just remember it's these two numbers again, just not squared the second time. Okay? And then cosine of the angle, because it's the law of cosine. All right, so now we're going to type that in, and let's see if I can remember what numbers to use. Okay, so we're going to use, in Desmos, we're going to, oh, and the nice thing about this is you can literally type it all in. So 15, the order of operations kind of does itself. Squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 15 times 10 times cosine 115 degrees. And then hit enter. And then you have 451.785. 451. And then it kept going. All right, now you should know that that does not make sense for side A because the other sides were like 15 centimeters and 10 centimeters. So 451 is like way too large. And the reason is because we have this squared here. Okay, so this is the side length squared. So how do we undo a squared? We take the square root. Okay, so A is approximately, so we're going to go back to Desmos and we're going to do the square root, and then I'm just going to type answer. And you should have 21.25. We're going to round to the tenths, so just one decimal place, so 21.3. Excuse me. Now, that's considerably larger than the other side, so let's talk about why, or how you know that makes sense. Do you see 115 is the angle across from it? And remember how we said the largest angles across from the largest side and the smallest angles across from the smallest side, etc.? So that kind of helps you understand, since 115 is so large, A should also be pretty large. Okay, so we just found the side. So it was pretty straightforward. We literally just plugged into the formula and typed it into the calculator. I would say the biggest thing students sometimes forget is to take that square root, so don't forget that. All right, now at this point you could find B or C. Now I will be honest, you have to find side A first before you can find any of the angles, because to find angles you need sides A, B, and C, if you notice in the formula. Okay, so like when you're finding angles, you would have to have all three sides. Okay, so at this point you could find B or C. It really makes no difference. So let's just go in alphabetical order. Let's find B, excuse me. That's not alphabetical order. All right, so we're going to do cosine of B equals. So let's go to our formula, which is here. And we're going to do A squared. So A is the one we just found. 21.3 squared plus C squared, which is 10 squared. And then it's a minus. And you guys, this is how I remember it. It's the one that you minus is the one that's across from the angle you're finding. All over 2 times AC. And then it's these two numbers, just not squared. So 21.3 times 10. Okay, and so now we're just going to type this into the calculator. Now here's one thing. You have to be careful. If you're typing it in your calculator and you're not using Desmos, you want to hit enter after this first line. Okay, so hit the first line, enter, and then hit answer and then divide. Or I don't think you have to hit answer. I'm sorry. After you hit enter here, then you will hit divide and then do the denominator in parentheses. So we should probably just get in the habit of doing that. Or you can type it all in if you do this, put parentheses at the beginning and at the end. I'll show you how to do that on Desmos, and that's how I think it'll be the best thing to do there. Okay? All right, so we can type this all in. I'll get in a better habit of just putting the parentheses as well. Okay, so let's type this in Desmos. All right, so we're going to type in, I'm going to clear. I'm going to open parentheses, and I'm going to type in 21.3 squared plus 10 squared minus 15 squared, close parentheses, because you want to tell the calculator all of this is in the numerator. Then divide, open parentheses again, all of this is in the denominator. 2 times, and then it's those first two numbers again, 21.3 times 10, close parentheses, and then hit enter. Now, 0.7715. All right, so again, that doesn't really make sense because we're trying to find angles, so it should be like, 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 52 degrees, etc. And remember, it's because we want to get this cosine. We want to get rid of that so that b's by itself. So we're going to take the inverse to cancel each other out. Okay, so we're going to do the inverse of cosine of this number. And so if we go back to Desmos, we can just hit answer. So let's go to function over here and hit inverse cosine, and then go back to main and then hit answer, and it'll pull it up for you. Okay, and if you're using your regular calculator, you can just hit second cosine second negative to pull the answer back up, and you should get 39.5. Oops. And that's an angle, so it should be degrees. Okay. And it should be considerably smaller than the 115. All right, and now we can find angle C. So we know we have 115 degrees. So 115 plus 39.5. We can just add those up. Okay, so we have that many degrees, and then we're going to subtract from 180. And you can just do that in the calculator. I'm just showing you what you're doing. And that's because if we know two angles, we can find the third one very easily. So that's, oops, not 26, because we got to borrow. Okay. All right, so then we should have 25.5, and that's your angle C. And remember, this is the smallest angle, is the smallest side across from it, and the answer is yes. All right, so we found one side using the formula on the left, and then we found an angle using the formula on the right. It's really just a matter of plugging in the formula correctly because it's very formula driven. Okay, so if you kind of can keep these formulas handy, you should be good to go. And this was a SAS problem, or side angle side. All right, let's look at one more. So number 2 is a side, side, side problem. That should not be difficult to tell. This is a side, side, and side. We have no angles. So if we're solving the triangle, we need to say the measure of angle A, the measure of angle B, and the measure of angle C. We got to find all of these things. Okay? All right, so we need to find these three things. And so that means we're going to just use the formulas on the right. Okay, and we're only going to have to do it twice because if we find two angles, we can find the third one, by adding and subtracting from 180. So again, it really makes no difference which one you find first. I just typically go in alphabetical order, but it makes no difference. Okay? So let's find the cosine of A first. Now I'm going to show y'all. I am not going to go back to this formula up at the top of the page. I'm going to show you how I remember it. So if I'm finding this angle here, I'm going to use the two sides on either side of it first. And it doesn't matter the order. Okay, so I could do 14 squared or 19 squared first. And then the one that's across from it is the one I go at the end. And then 2 times the first 2 numbers. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? So I did the 2 on either side of it, and then I did subtract the one across from it. And then in the denominator, 2 times the first 2 numbers, like the ones on either side of the angle you're looking for. Okay? We'll do it again with B and or C. Okay? So let's type that into Desmos. All right, so we're going to type in, sorry, I have messages blowing up. Okay, so we're going to type in 19 squared, I wrote it down on another piece of paper, plus, oops, that's a minus, plus 14 squared minus 8 squared, close parentheses, then divide by, and then open parentheses again, 2 times those first 2 numbers, 19 and 14. And again, it does not matter the order because multiplication is commutative, remember, so it doesn't matter if you put 19 or 14 first. All right, and then we'll hit enter. And you get 0.9266. So cosine of A is 0.9226. Is that what I said? Yeah. Okay, so then remember we have to take the inverse cosine. So we're going to go inverse cosine of that approximation, and then we should get our answer. So A is approximately. So we'll go back to our calculator and do second cosine and then the answer. And then hit enter. And you should get 22.075, which will round, if we're rounding to the tenths, to 22.1. Okay, so that's 22.1 degrees. And then I'm going to put it in here just to kind of make sure. That's a pretty small angle, but it's across from a small side, so that kind of matches, you know, kind of goes with it. Let's check ourselves once we do the next one to make sure that that really seems to make sense. All right, I'm going to make this a little smaller. And now let's do B or C. It does not make a difference. Like I said, our answers may be off just slightly by like a tenth or a couple tenths if we choose to do different angles, but it's no big deal. All right, so if we're finding cosine of B, so if we're finding this angle, we're going to go the sides on either side of it, 8 squared plus 14 squared, minus the one across from it. And let's put that in parentheses, divide, and then 2 times the first 2 numbers, 8 times 14, or the ones on either side. Okay? Sorry, I don't want those arrows to confuse you later. Okay, so let's type that into the calculator. I don't think I wrote this down, so I need to write it down really quickly so I don't forget. Okay, so in Desmos, we're going to just type it in exactly as we see it. Don't forget your parentheses because that will mess everything up. Okay, so open parentheses, 8 squared plus 14 squared minus 19 squared, close parentheses, then divide, open a new set of parentheses, 2 times 8 times 14. And again, if you're doing this in your own calculator, it will work like this, you know, no problem, okay? The same way with parentheses. Now we get a negative, but don't be alarmed by that. It's no problem. So negative 0.45. Changed colors on me. And now we want to take the inverse cosine of that number, and then we should have our B. Okay, so I'm going to do the inverse cosine of the answer, and that's 116.8. Now that seems pretty large, so let's make sure that that kind of matches up or makes sense. Now y'all, my picture, y'all know I'm just a creature of habit. I tend to draw the same picture every time. So mine does not look obtuse, but remember the picture is just there to help you, okay? Does 1/16 make sense? And it does, because 19 is across from it, and it's, considerably larger than 8 or 14. All right, and now that we know that side, we can just add the two up, 22.1 and plus, what is the next one? 116.8, and then subtract that from 180 to get 41.1 degrees. Okay, so I know I've only done 2 examples, but that's all I plan to do. If you need to go back and kind of review how to find a side, it's here at the beginning with number 1. And then I did 3 different ones where you're finding an angle. All right, so I'm going to have you do 2 on your own, numbers 3 and 4 here. But feel free to rewind or whatever, or YouTube other videos on law of cosine if you need to. But the rules are going to stay the same. Just solve the triangle, so find all 3 missing pieces and submit it in the form that I attach so I can have some feedback before we move forward. Okay? Awesome, you guys. Hope y'all are doing well. I miss you a lot. Bye.